Hello everybody and welcome back to 89 Games. Yes, I'm back. I know it's been a while. Sorry guys, but I am still here and we're going to return to the Gloomhaven series where we're going to cover each character, all their cards level 1 to 9, probably talk about some items that's good for each character, and then take a quick look at their perks. So we're going to come back and start with the Scoundrel again. I know I did a couple of videos, but I want to do a new format where we just go through all the cards, get it all done, all in one video, as concise as possible to help y'all out. So let's go ahead and jump into the Scoundrel here. So we'll take a look at the cards, and now I've covered everything in the beginner's guide for the Scoundrel, so you can check that out here if you'd like. But I will go ahead and cover all the cards again quickly anyway, so let's go ahead and jump in right here, starting out with Single Out. Now, I like Single Out for the Scoundrel. Scoundrel's very much a run-in, attack, and run-out type of character, so you go late, run in, hit something, go early the next turn, hit something, and then run back. That's kind of the way I like to play it. It's not necessarily the way you have to play it, but the initiatives with the late ones like 86 here, 60 here, a 93, and then you got your really early ones, your 4, your 6, your 10, it makes it really well suited to doing that kind of gameplay. So Single Out, attack 3, add +2 attack and gain experience when the target's adjacent to an ally. This one and Flanking Strike are both exactly the same on top, and they work great. I use this all the time. Again, so you could use Single Out to go really late, maybe on turn 1, and then use Flanking Strike turn 2 to hit them again. So you're talking about, 10 average damage over those 2 turns just from these 2 cards. Although usually, the Single Out will kill the enemy the first time, so it doesn't always work out that way. But Single Out, really good. The bottom of it here, on your next 4 attacks targeting enemies adjacent to none of their allies, you get 2 additional attack, along with a couple experience points along the way. This one is actually really good too. If you do the math and you think about it, over the course of a scenario, you might get to use this Single Out card 4 or 5 times. So getting 4 uses out of the bottom of this is almost as good as the top. Of course, it is a burn, so you'll lower your total hand size and turns overall. But it can be really good, especially with combining with things like your range attack, like throwing knives or swift bow. It can come in really handy for doing some extra damage. Plus, it still works to adding to Flanking Strike and things like that too. So, very good. I like this card. I usually keep it in all the way through. And then, of course, the late initiative is really good for letting your tank get out in front first, and then you can go up and smack something really hard afterwards. Okay, so moving on to Flanking Strike. So this one's your initiative 4, one of the earliest initiatives you can get, obviously. So this is good for going very early and then using another card to move out of the way and get out of there before you take damage. So again, Flanking Strike at the top, it's good for all the same reasons that Single Out is. It does the exact same thing. And then the bottom of move 5 is really good. The Scoundrel has a lot of high movement cards. So again, very good for getting into range, doing damage, and getting out. Moving on to Smoke Bomb. Now, Smoke Bomb's a fun card, but I do call this a boss battle type of card because, so you go invisible, which you are invisible until the end of your next turn, and on your next attack, while invisible, you double the value of an attack and gain 2 experience points. It also activates Darkness. Now, it is a burn, but if you use this appropriately with some other buffs and maybe something like Single Out or Flanking Strike or even the top of Backstab here, you can do upwards of like 18 to 20 damage to a boss. If you pull a ×2 modifier, 40 damage plus. I've done that before in a boss fight where I did something like 36 damage or something like that to a boss in one attack and basically, took them out almost in one turn. So Smoke Bomb, a very good boss battle card. I would not necessarily take this one on every scenario though, as it's really, using this as a burn to take out a standard enemy is not that great, kind of wasteful. The bottom is a pull 2 range 3, which works really well for bringing someone into range for like Flanking Strike or Single Out. However, again, it's situational. So I would set this one aside, take it on boss battles, probably not take it on every scenario. And then of course the initiative 12, really good for going early. It's really hard for anyone to beat the Scoundrel in initiative, just in general, because most of her cards are very low initiatives. Alright, so moving on to Backstab. Backstab is basically an upgraded version of Single Out and Flanking Strike's top, because it's attack 3 still, but you get 2 if the target's adjacent to your allies, and then you get 2 more if the target's not adjacent to any of their allies, and plus 1 experience for each of those situations. So this is potentially an attack 7. So again, combined with Smoke Bomb, we're talking attack 14, potentially, if you have the bottom of Single Eye active. Now you're talking attack 16, double is 32, so really, really good boss battle card again. I would not use this on most standard scenarios, on standard enemies, because again, it feels kind of wasteful because you do only have 9 cards with the Scoundrel, so I want to be careful about using too many burns. Not that you can't, you can still use 1 or 2 through the course of a match, or of a scenario, but you want to be more careful, especially something like this ends up usually being overkill for your standard enemies. Single out and flanking straight top are more than enough. So, and then the bottom, of course, is a move 6, which is always good to have. And the initiative 6, go really fast, move really far. Overall, good card, but I would probably save it also for boss fights. Now, Thief Snack is kind of a utility card. I usually don't use this one. You can disarm a trap with it, so if you're going into a scenario where there's traps, that can be useful. I mean, you think about the very first scenario of the game in the campaign, there's 2 traps blocking a door, and the only way to get past them is you have to step on them, or all your characters have to have jump, which is usually not the case. So, disarming the trap, this can be useful in that situation. The bottom of this card is attack 3, 1 experience, which a bottom attack is always very useful, but the only problem with it is that you have to plan on typically not moving, because you're going to use a top attack and a bottom attack. So you better hope that you're going to kill the enemy that you're fighting with this, or that you maybe have a tank or something beside you that went before you did so that you don't take the hits. Although, I mean, the Scoundrel is a medium health character, so you can take a hit every once in a while. So good for a bottom attack, but I just don't usually get much use out of this, and it seems like it's hard. And again, I usually play the run in, hit something again, run out strategy, which means that this bottom attack usually isn't useful for the way I play the character, but you might find a better use or a different use for this card when you're playing. So, and then 23 initiative is good. It beats most initiatives, as most of her cards do. All right, so moving on to Venom Shiv. Attack 3, Poison. Poison is always great. Anytime you can poison an enemy, that's just more damage that your entire party will do to that enemy. So attack 3 with Poison is a great attack. It's repeatable. It's 1 XP, which is another point about the Scoundrel, is that so many of her cards, I mean, if you look at this, XP on this card, XP on this card, XP on this card, XP, XP, XP. Every single card, almost, of her starting cards gives you XP. It is really easy to level the Scoundrel up very quickly. So Venom Shiv, back to Venom Shiv though. So the top is great. I would keep this card in my hand probably for a long time, just because that attack 3 poison is really good. The bottom, move 5, obviously, again, I can't say much more about movement. Move 5 is great, is awesome. And then, initiative 60, so hopefully you can go a little bit later. This is so that maybe your tank or someone was able to go before you if you need them to draw the aggro so you don't take damage. So moving on to Throwing Knives, this is her first ranged attack, which is attack 2, target 2, and range 3, gives you 1 experience point. Again, this is just really good as a utility if you're getting low on cards and you don't really have the movement to get out of danger. You might just want to stay back, use a range attack until your rest comes, and then you can go back to going up into melee. So I like this card as just kind of a, like I said, just to give me a little bit of options, a little bit of versatility with the character. And then the bottom is a loot 2, but it's a burn. So in my opinion, that's pretty crap. You don't really want to burn to loot. I mean, unless we're talking like you're at towards the end of a scenario and you can loot like 8 piles of gold because it's a loot 2, or your objective is to loot a quest, to loot a chest, then, you don't have to get all the way there with this one. But generally, I don't like the bottom of this one. So this one does eventually get taken out of my hand, typically just because the bottom to me is not very useful. Initiative 10, though, is still pretty nice. So moving on to Quick Hands, move 2, attack 2, and move on top. Again, a move on top or an attack on bottom is always really nice. It gives you a lot of versatility. But this one is also an attack 2 with the move 2. So it's very nice for getting that extra step that you need to get next to someone. And this is one situation where, this combined with, Thief Snack bottom, they could get an attack 5 out of that. But to me, I would just be using something like single out or flanking strike anyway. Or he's going to give me attack 5 if I play it right. You know, if there's an ally adjacent to that enemy. So quick hands to me is one that's like, I don't like it too much, to be honest. And it's usually one that I will end up taking out. But that versatility does come in handy, and I do have situations where I wish I had left that card in. So then moving on to the bottom of that card, though, is a loot 1. This one's not a burn, so not bad, not bad. Especially if you're trying to get a lot of loot and you're trying to level up your character, or rather get better equipment. Not bad to take this one with you just to be able to use that loot 1 and grab extra loot. And then the initiative 64, again, good for going a little bit later if you need to make sure other characters get out there in front of you. And then finally, for the level 1 cards, we have Special Mixture. Really good, heal 3 on self, which comes in handy all the time. And then a move 3, poison an adjacent enemy. Again, poison, always very good. So I like to keep this card in my hand because, again, the heal 3 self, this is her only heal card in the beginning. So it's good to have that with you, and especially if you don't have a healer in your party. And then a move 3 and poison the enemy at the end is always very useful utility. Again, everyone else is going to do more damage to that enemy if they're poisoned. And then initiative 33 is kind of a very meh initiative. Like, you're not going to go early or slow with that one. So probably not a card I would use for the initiative. So then moving on to our X cards, we have Sinister Opportunity, which is an attack 3. We add +1 attack for each ally adjacent to the target. And if you have darkness, you can consume it to add +2 attack instead of 1 and gain an experience point. Now, this card is kind of an upgrade to the single out and flanking strike top in a way, because if you do have an ally adjacent, it's an attack 4. But it's not just 1. If you look at flanking strike and single out, it's when the target is adjacent to any of your allies. It only registers once, so you get +2 attack no matter how many of your allies are adjacent to that enemy. With Sinister Opportunity, it's +1 attack for each of your allies adjacent to the target. So if you have a target surrounded, you could potentially get a +3 attack out of this, making it an attack 6. And if you have darkness, then it actually ends up being, I think, an attack 9, because you get +6 from your allies. So it's kind of situational. It'd be a little more difficult to set up. But if you're playing single player and you're controlling the entire party, this card could be really powerful because you get to choose when you're going to use it. If you're playing with other people, though, probably not a great idea because you can't be guaranteed that they're going to do what you want them to do to make this card have the best effect. The bottom is a move 3, and you force an adjacent enemy to move 1. You get to control that action, but they have to end in a hex adjacent to you. So this is more or less just positioning an enemy where you need them to be. Like, you can move 3 and move the enemy between you and a friend, and then use something like single out or flanking strike. So kind of another situational card, and I've never really played with this one. So I don't know how effective that might be. Generally, I usually just keep single out flanking strike. I don't use this one because these are more consistent. I know what I'm going to get out of them every time. This one's a little harder to predict, how useful it might actually be in the game. Although, again, if you're playing a single player, the next time I play through, maybe I should use this one if I'm playing single player, because I could see how effective we could make that. Then moving on to the next X card is Trickster's Reversal. This one is attack 2, and you get plus attack where X is double the shield value of the target. So, on a map where you know there's shielded enemies, this card will be really, really powerful. I mean, if you talk about an enemy that has 3 shield, you're getting attack 6 plus the 2, so attack 8 on that enemy. So you're completely negating their shield and then doing damage, a lot of damage on top. So this is very good for taking out enemies like living spirits, or think like flame demons, anything that has a lot of shield and lower health. This would be really good for taking them out. It is a burn though, which is the part that sucks, because you're only going to get to use it once, and you'll have to rely on your allies hopefully to take care of the rest of the shielded enemies. But it is a good card to bring on a map where you know there's shielded enemies. And then we have Initiative 9, again, really good for going early. And then the bottom of this one, I'm finding, I hadn't used this card before, but I just recently started using it, and actually this bottom is very effective. The next time you suffer damage this round, suffer no damage instead. So it's great for staying up in the fight and not retreating. If you don't want to retreat for some reason that turn, or you can't, the bottom of this card is really good for just, you automatically negate the first attack on you. So if only one enemy is going to attack you that turn, you don't have to worry about it at all. Of course, you got 2 or 3 attacking you. You know, you can still mitigate that damage by using this card because the first attack will do no damage at all. So this is actually a really kind of get out of jail free card. Like, you can make a mistake or something and be like, oh crap, okay, I'm going to get hit really hard. Well, I'm going to use this card, and now you won't take any damage at all. So the bottoms are really good in certain situations, but I tend to find myself in those situations more often than I thought I would. So then moving on to the last X card is Swift Bow here with attack 3, range 4. That is a very good range attack. Most of your range attacks are either range 2 or range 3. So a range 4 is very nice to have. And that's, I mean, like I said, if you add the single out bottom when you use this attack, you get +2 attack to it. This becomes an attack 5 at range 4. So Swift Bow is really good if you want to have that ranged option. And you could even maybe trade it for throwing knives if you wanted to, or, you know, keep both those in and play more of a mixed build between melee and range. But I mean, I like Swift Bow for what it is. I don't use it a whole lot just because it is only the 1 attack versus throwing knives. I get to attack 2 things. So, but it is an option that's there if you want to have a ranged option. The bottom is a move 2 and you loot every hex you enter with this action. It's not that good. I mean, a move 2 is a basic move, and, you know, you loot every hex you move through with the action, but why wouldn't you just use a loot 1 card? You know, if there's 2 piles next to you, just use a loot 1, you get 2 piles. In this case, the best you can do is loot 2 piles of gold, because you only loot the hexes you enter. Now, I will say, if you use boots that increase your movement and then use this, that would make a lot more sense, because you could move 4 tiles or 5 tiles, and then you'd be able to pick up any gold. If there was a train of gold through those 5 tiles, you'd get all 5. So in that case, with increased movement from an item, it might be useful, but just the base card itself, the bottom is really not that good. And then Initiative 36, again, kind of meh. So that's our beginner cards, as quickly as I could. Probably not as quick as I should, but as quick as I could. All right. So let's talk the level cards now. So we're going to move on to level 2. Level 2, we're going to get Open Wound and Flintlock. So if we look at Open Wound here, attack 4, and you add wound and gain experience point when targets adjacent to one of your allies. So this is more or less a replacement for like single out or flanking strikes top, because if you think about it, it will do the same amount of damage over the course of 1 turn. You'll do attack 4, and then you'll add wound, so they'll take wound damage from the attack when they go next, which is your extra attack from like the attack 5 you'd be getting from single out or flanking strike. So if you think about the overall damage output, it's essentially the same, except for, of course, if the enemy stays alive and stays wounded, they're going to take more damage over time. So I do like Open Wound. It's usually the card I take at level 2. And then the bottom of it is another move 5, which, again, move 5. Scoundrel is fast. Initiative 11 is really good. Now, Flintlock is the other choice at level 2. There's a top loot, which is really good if you're all about gathering gold. And, I mean, if you get one of the retirement goals that requires you to collect a bunch of gold, then I could see taking these loot cards. But in general, for the gameplay, I still don't like the loot cards. I think they're... In Gloomhaven, you know, money is good for getting those items, and then upgrades, of course, to your cards to get enhancements and stuff. But I just think that you can get enough loot and money without having to use loot cards on a regular basis. So I don't like just loot actions too much. Don't like them too often. Maybe have 1 card in your hand for looting if you want to do that. The bottom of this one, though, is where the attack comes in. It's an attack 5, range 4, 2 experience. It is a burn, or a lost card is technically the term, but I like to call them burn because it looks like the little card is on fire. Anyway, attack 5, range 4. You know, it's really good. It's an upgrade of Swift Bow, basically, except for this one is a burn. Again, it's not it might be a boss fight card, because if you combine it with Smoke Bomb and like the single outs bottom, you could end up getting an attack 14 out of this. So maybe a boss fight card if you need to fight the boss from range. But usually I don't take this one because I don't like the burn. And I mean, I can get 5 damage out of this card on a regular basis, where I can only get that once out of this one. So typically I'm going to take Open Wound here. Although I do think I should play through the game once and use all the cards I would never take, just to see how useful they actually are. So let's move on to level 3 and talk about those two cards. So at level 3, we're going to have Hidden Daggers and Duelist Advance. So Hidden Daggers is an attack 4, range 3, target 2 to experience, but again, a burn. These burns are really not good for the Scoundrel since she only has 9 cards. Again, like I said, you might only want to use 1 or 2 burns during a scenario, or you'll find yourself running out of turns. Although, if you like to burn hot and do as much damage as possible with her before she's out, I mean, that can be an effective strategy, but you're always going to be down a character by the end of a scenario. So the bottom of this one, though, is Invisible Self. So the bottom here is really good because it would work with something like Smoke Bomb. Now, I've never actually tested this, but I noticed when reading this the other day that Smoke Bomb has the persistent icon there, which means that as long as you don't attack someone while invisible, this card will stay active. So if you have another way to go invisible later, like the bottom of Hidden Daggers here, then you can kind of save that doubled attack until you're ready to actually use it. So, that might be a reason to take this card. That way you can kind of just plan when you want to actually use your big attack. And then, of course, the top, again, situational. Like, if you've got 2 enemies you can take out with this and burn, it might be good. That really just depends probably a lot on your party composition and your playstyle. I don't typically take this one, though, just because I don't like the burn. But the invisible is hard to pass up, though. I can understand taking this card just for the invisibility. Now, the bottom one here, the other one, Duelist Advance. This is an upgrade to, which one was it? The Quick Hands. Quick Hands was a move 2, attack 2. Duelist Advance is a move 3, attack 3. It's basically a straight upgrade to Quick Hands. I like this one. I usually take it. Moving 3 and attacking 3 is solid. Plus, you can use something else on the bottom. You can even move in, attack, and then use a bottom move to move back away. Bottom of this one, you get to add +2 attack to all your attacks this round targeting enemies adjacent to none of their allies. So this is the same thing as Single Out's bottom, except it only works for 1 round, but you don't have to burn the card. It doesn't go away. You'll get it back after you take a rest. So if you plan this and combine it with usually probably a range attack, like something like Throwing Knives top, now you get to do potentially an attack 4 on enemies as long as they're not adjacent to each other. So Duelist Advance is pretty good. That's usually the one I'm going to take at level 3. Then we'll move on to level 4. Now at level 4, we get Flurry of Blades or Gruesome Advantage. Flurry of Blades gives us attack 2, range 3, target 3. So again, kind of an upgrade to not Duelist Advance, but Quick Hands. Wait a minute, not Quick Hands. Throwing Knives, sorry. Throwing Knives. So this is basically a straight upgrade to Throwing Knives because we get 2, range 3, target 2. Here we get 2, range 3, target 3. This one's, again, just really good for spreading out a bunch of damage, and this does work if you add something like Single Out's bottom, or even as, I can't remember for sure if this counts as just 1 attack action, so Smoke Bomb actually doubles all 3 of these attacks. I think it does, but it's been a while since I've done it, so I'm not 100% sure. And then the bottom on this one, though, is a move 4, and you gain advantage on all your attacks this round. That is extremely powerful. This is a good way to guarantee that you don't miss when you're about to do the big attack on the boss. We talked about that attack 14, 16, potentially getting doubled. You don't want to miss when you're about to do that much damage. So using advantage can guarantee that you're not going to miss. The worst you're going to get is a -2. So you'll still do a ton of damage, and you won't waste all those burns. So I really do like Flurry of Blades, plus Initiative 3 is our lowest initiative so far. Really good. Gruesome Advantage is good for other reasons. This is basically a straight upgrade to Backstab. So on this one, we get attack 3, and then we gain 3 if the target is adjacent to our allies, and we add another 3 if it's not adjacent to its allies. So it's the exact same thing as Backstab, except for it makes it +3 attack instead of +2 attack for those 2 conditions. Again, it's a burn, but this might be a good one to take to replace Backstab, and again, use in a boss fight. The bottom move 7 is really, I mean, you can move across an entire room, sometimes an entire map with a move 7, with a little bit of boost from maybe an item. So move 7, really, really good. But I think for general use, you're going to get more out of Flurry of Blades than you will Gruesome Advantage. again, you know, if you want to make sure your Scoundrel is just a boss killer, then I'd go with Gruesome Advantage. But if you want to be more useful in all the scenarios, I would go Flurry of Blades. That's usually the way I'm going to go. So we're going to move on to level 5 now. At level 5, we'll get Call of the Week, which is attack 4, and we add +2 attack and gain experience when the target's adjacent to any of your allies. And then the bottom, on your next 6 attacks targeting enemies with Disarm, Immobilize, or Stun, you add +2 attack. And then the other one is Visage of the Inevitable. Kill one adjacent normal enemy that is adjacent to none of its allies and also adjacent to any of your allies. And then the bottom is a move to poison all adjacent enemies. So, Call of the Week is, the top of this one is an upgrade to either Single Out or Flanking Strike top. Because instead of it being attack 3, add 2, it's attack 4, add 2. With the same condition, have an ally adjacent to the target. So that's a good upgrade for either of those two to trade out. And then the bottom, very situational. You know, if you have another character in your party that's dishing out a lot of status effects, disarms, immobilizes, and stuns, then this could be useful because this does work for 6 attacks. So it's better in that way than Single Out's bottom because this one only works for 4, but this one has less conditions you have to worry about than Call of the Week because they do have to have one of these 3 conditions. So it could be harder to use, but if you have a character in your party that dishes out a lot of status effects, then this could actually be really useful. And again, easier to do if you're playing in a party that you're controlling rather than a party with friends. Although if you communicate well, you can still get good use out of it. So then we got Visage of the Inevitable. This one really, really good because killing an enemy with just outright kills them. There's no roll, there's no modifier cards, it's just dead. Now, it does have to be by itself, not adjacent to its allies, and also has to be adjacent to one of your allies. So it's very situational, but with the right party, you can make that happen with some pushes and some pulls. You can make this situation happen. So a little more control over getting that to be the situation, and then you just get to kill a normal enemy. So, you know, for shielded enemies that are tougher, even when they're normals, really good for just taking them out. Or some of those high HP enemies. I can't explain enough how powerful just instant kill card is. I was playing in a party with someone, we were playing the board game version, not the digital, but we were playing with a character who he had 1 or 2 just instant kills. And, I mean, it was super powerful. It was so convenient. It's like, nope, I got this guy. Like, oh, you got him? Like, yeah, I got him. And you go over and just, boom, instant kill. So these are very powerful. The bottom is a move to poison all adjacent enemies. Again, very powerful because now you're adding more damage to everyone else in your party, giving them more damage on their attacks to those poisoned enemies. So this is kind of a hard decision here at level 5. You know, Call of the Week, very powerful, a very good trade for like Flanking Strike or something. But the bottom is a little more situational, a little harder to use. And then, but Visage of the Inevitable, I think, honestly, I'm going to take this one if I take one. I can't remember what I've done in the past, but I think if I was playing right now, I would take that one. Just because, like I said, the killing an enemy is super powerful. And it's not too difficult to make this happen with the right party combination. Plus, another high initiative, because there's not a lot of cards that she has that have that higher initiative. So this is kind of nice if I need to go late. Alright, so let's move on to level 6. Level 6, Crippling Poison and Burning Oil. So, Crippling Poison is a burn card, but it adds +2 attack to all your attacks targeting enemies with poison. And this one is persistent. This one doesn't go away. So, considering how many attacks the Scoundrel has that can poison enemies, this is a very good card just to throw on early, active. Yeah, it takes your turns down some, but I mean, you're doing 2 additional damage guaranteed to anything that's poisoned. And it's not too hard to poison things. Like I said, you've got at least 2 cards at the bottom can poison, and you have at least 1 attack at the top can poison at this point. So if you want to kind of play a poison build with the Scoundrel, you'd probably want to take this one. That's a lot of extra damage over the course of an entire scenario. And then the bottom, guess what? It's an attack 2, poison, immobilize. Another way to poison. Of course, you'd have to wait till you get the card back, but something like a stamina potion can make that happen very quickly. So Crippling Poison, pretty good card. Very meh initiative though. And then Burning Oil does an attack 4, range 3, and wound. Activates fire, gives you XP. And then the bottom is a loot 2. That gives you 1 XP, which this loot 2 is not a burn. So it could be more useful. Again, loot cards, it really depends if you just really want the money because you're looking for a specific item. But most of the time, you're probably not going to want to have those cards taking up space in your hand. But the top here, an attack 4, range 3 with wound is pretty much a straight replacement for Swift Bow because it's an attack 3, range 4. So we end up with an attack 4, range 3. We're just trading the range and attack power, but it also adds wound. So this one, really good if you're trying to go for more of a ranged build or maybe a wound build. However, I like the idea of playing a poison build and going with crippling poison, so I think that's the one I would take here at level 6. And then moving on to level 7, we've got Stick to the Shadows and Spring the Trap. So Stick to the Shadows, we've got attack 4, add +4 attack, and gain 2 experience when the target is adjacent to any of your allies. Now, in order to do this second part, though, we do have to have Darkness activated. So it's an attack 4. If we have Darkness, then we get to add the +4 attack and get 2 XP when the target is adjacent to any of our allies. So this is, again, an upgrade to single out Flanking Strike. That it's going to give you an attack 4 and then a +4, but you have to have that Darkness activated, which you can plan for that, but again, it can be kind of situational because the enemies might end up using it before you get to use it. But a very powerful attack 8. Plus this card, of course, has 2 pips there, which means you can enhance this card later on, making it an attack 6. The bottom, move 2, go invisible. Very, very useful. Any card that makes you go invisible, especially for the Scoundrel, the way her deck is built, invisibility is very good for just not taking damage and being where you need to be when you need to be there. The other one is Spring the Trap. So we have a disarm 1 adjacent trap again, except in this case we target one enemy within range 3 to suffer the effects of that trap. So we're essentially chucking the trap at an enemy, which I don't have to tell you if you've played the game at all, is very powerful because as you get to higher levels, these traps end up being 4 and 5 and 6 damage, and they're suffer damage, which means there's no way for the enemy to avoid the damage. So chucking a trap, it's very good. But again, you have to have traps on the scenario. If you don't have traps on the scenario, then this becomes completely useless. But if you do have traps, it's a very effective card. The bottom is on your next attack, targeting an enemy adjacent to none of its allies and also adjacent to any of your allies. So similar situation as most of our cards. Double the value of the attack and gain 2 XP. So this is a burn, but it is a persistent card, which means you can play this and wait until this situation applies before the card will actually take effect. So you won't actually have to use this card, or rather the effect of this card won't actually get used until you do target an enemy that doesn't have any friends around it, has one of your friends next to it, and then you'll double the attack value. So again, probably a good boss killer card for the bottom of this one. But that top, I really do like the top of this one if we're playing scenarios that have traps. Now, so between Stick the Shadows and Spring the Trap, honestly, I'd have to say that both of these cards are good. And it would just depend on how you want to play it. If you're playing the invisibility route, then definitely take Stick to the Shadows. This is also a good card to combine with something like Smoke Bomb, because this will make you go invisible, and then it would also activate Darkness, so you would have an attack 8 and attack 16 with the combination of these 2 cards, so a good boss killer situation. So this one's just really going to come down to how you want to play, and I think in this case I'm going to go with Spring the Trap because I haven't been taking a lot of the invisibility, and this would be a card that I would only put in my hand if I'm playing a scenario that I know has traps in it, or that I think will have traps in it. So moving on to level 8, we're almost there. Level 8, attack 2, range 3, and target 4, gain 1 XP. Very, very good upgrade to essentially, what was it? Throwing Knives, and then Flurry of Blades. So Flurry of Blades was 2-3-3. Now we've got 2-3-4, and we still have a move 4, but we don't gain advantage. We get Retaliate 1 instead. So pretty much an upgrade for Flurry of Blades. I do like the Retaliate, although again, we don't want to be taking a bunch of hits as the Scoundrel, but you know, this would be one situation where you could potentially take one, get that Retaliate off, and then this target 4 is just amazing. That's a lot of, you know, multiple targets taking damage, And then we have Pain's End, heal self 8, experience 2. That is a burn though, but this is a good like, oh crap card that I need to save myself. The bottom, move 3, and here's another kill one adjacent enemy whose current hit point value is equal to equal or less than 3. So this card, this bottom is very, very good for taking out those enemies where, oh crap, he has 1 health left or 2 health. You know, you don't want to waste an attack on him, so you move up 2 next to him and he's just dead. And then you can use your top for something else. So this is a pretty good card, in my opinion, for finishing off those enemies that have just a little bit of health left. Now, between those two, Stiletto Storm, Pain's End, I honestly think that I'm going to take Pain's End for the bottom, because it is really nice to be able to finish off those little enemies and not have to let another character waste an attack to only, you know, for 1 or 2 damage. And then plus, again, it's a good oh crap card if you need a big heal. So, finally, moving on to level 9. Attack 4, target all adjacent enemies for the long con here. And then you disarm. So it's attack 4, target all adjacent enemies, disarm. And then the bottom, force 1 adjacent normal or elite enemy to perform its turn this round as if its allies were enemies and its enemies were allies, with you controlling the actions. Okay. And then we have Watch It Burn, add poison and wound to all your attacks. Super powerful. And then the bottom, move 5, wound all adjacent targets. So, at level 9, attack 4, target all adjacent enemies and disarm them. That's powerful, and it's reusable. So you jump into a bunch of enemies, 3 enemies, 4 enemies, go right in the middle of them, hit all of them for 4, and they can't hit you back, because you disarm them all. Very, very powerful, especially with the Scoundrel's playstyle. And then, of course, Initiative 2 is the best initiative that you can get, besides 1, of course. But as far as the Scoundrel goes, I believe that is the best initiative. And then the bottom where you get to control an enemy, that is super powerful, because certain enemies that have like multiple attacks, this would be really good for doing a ton of damage to enemies, and you get to control that enemy to attack other enemies. I'd say this is very, very powerful, but again, a burn, but a lot of fun. A lot of fun to use. And then the other card we have, Watch It Burn. Poison and wound to all your attacks. There's not much to say about that. That's awesome. That means everyone will be doing additional damage, plus enemies will be constantly taking damage from the wound. That is a huge damage multiplier if you think about, you know, the effects of those statuses on enemies over the course of a few turns. If you have a party of 4 and they're poisoned, you poisoned them, now everyone else attacks them, that's 3 extra damage. They take 1 more extra damage from the wound on their turn, the enemy, and then on the next turn, it all happens again. So we're talking a potential 4 extra damage every turn on that enemy from this card. So that's really, really good, especially if you combine some of your multi-attacks, like your throwing knives and the other ones that had multiple targets. Really powerful. Bottom, move 5, wound all adjacent enemies. That's good too. But I would just probably throw the top of this out early, and that's how I would play it the whole time. So between these two, I would say Long Con is more fun because you get to control an enemy and make them destroy their friends, but it is a burn. I think Watch It Burn is the one that I would take, just because that poison and wound to all your attacks is super powerful. So Watch It Burn would be my level 9 card. And there we have it. That was all the cards all the way through level 9. So let's talk about a few items, what we might want to equip. Okay, so talking items for the Scoundrel, I think we're going to go with the helmet. We're going to stick with more of the beginner items. I know I've got pretty much everything unlocked here, but let's just try to talk about some basic items, and then you can build on from that and add as you play the character and learn yourself. But from the very beginning, early on, the head item I would pick is, once you get it unlocked, which I think was fairly early on, would be the Empowering Talisman, because you can refresh one of your consumed items. And this works really well for like a stamina potion, being able to refresh it and use a stamina potion a second time. Really good, especially on the Scoundrel who only has 9 cards in their hand. So I'd probably take Empowering Talisman when you do get that unlocked for the head item. And then moving on to armor. Obviously at the beginning I usually stick with leather armor to start. Gives the enemies disadvantage for the first 2 times they attack you. And then of course you get it back on a long rest, and then you can upgrade that later to the studded armor, which also gives you 1 shield as an addition to the disadvantage for the enemy. And then, of course, there's multiple other items you could probably use. Like, you could go with a Cloak of Invisibility if you want to go with the Invisibility build. That's pretty good. Or you could even go with the Flea Bitten Shawl, which I believe this is from the Jaws of the Lion DLC. But this one makes you initiative 99 at all times. So that's really good for the Scoundrel as well, to keep her from getting targeted, even when she's up close and personal fighting enemies. As long as she has a friend next to her, she shouldn't get targeted. So that's some ideas for armor. We move over to items, our hand items. I would go with a shield, honestly, because the Scoundrel does have is mainly a melee character. So having a shield in there is a really good idea, just to negate some more damage. And then, of course, that can be upgraded to better shields later on, as long as they don't make you add negative modifiers, which, of course, the first shield here does not. And then as far as like a weapon, I'd say the Poison Dagger, even though we have attacks and stuff that poison, if you're going to go with a poison build, Poison Dagger, always very good because you get that free extra poison attack every time, every rest. You'd get a new poison attack you can use, besides what cards that already have poison on them. So that's probably what I would stick with for beginning on her and those. And then if we go to shoes, like I said, she does not need a bunch of extra movement, so I wouldn't worry about anything that boosts movement for her. I would go in the beginning. Honestly, there's probably not a lot to go with until you get the winged shoes unlocked, which I can't remember. Again, I think that's pretty early on. But the winged shoes give you jump to one of your movements. So the Scoundrel has absolutely no jump. So in later scenarios, when there's a lot of obstacles, there's a lot of traps, having these comes in real handy, being able to jump over enemies. So anything that's going to give you jump is a great idea for shoes for the Scoundrel. And then finally, we go to our bag items, and we're just going to stick with a couple potions here. So you definitely want to pick up Stamina Potion. Whatever version of it you get earliest access to would be the Miners. Definitely pick up the Stamina Potion because it helps you bring discarded cards back so that you can actually add more turns to the Scoundrel. So Stamina Potion is a very good idea, and anything else that gives you cards back or gives you this item back, some, like I spoke earlier about, we talked about the Empowering Talisman, that would be able to give you your Stamina Potion back after you've used it. So Stamina Potion's definitely a must for the Scoundrel. And other than that, you might want to go with a Health Potion just because you only have 1 or 2 cards where you can heal yourself. So having some extra healing is really good. I don't usually go Power Potion because it adds +1 to an entire attack action. So in the beginning, you don't have a lot of multi-attacks with the Scoundrel other than throwing knives. So I wouldn't take this early on. Now later in the game, it might make more sense because you've got attacks that are target 3, target 4. Then you're doing a lot more damage. But early on, I would probably not worry about the minor Power Potion. And that covers the basics of items for the Scoundrel. Now let's quickly just look at her perks real quick. So as I mentioned in other videos, and I'll mention again here, always go for the ones that remove negatives first. Except for your specials, of course. If you have the specials like this one, ignore negative scenario effects, always take that one first. That way, you know, if you start the scenario with curses, you start poisoned, you start damaged, it doesn't affect you. This is really good for helping the Scoundrel stay more effective in some of those scenarios, especially those ones that make you discard cards. You won't have to do that if you have this perk. So I would take that one first and foremost before doing any of the others. So once you have that, though, then we're just going to go with, you know, we're going to get rid of 2 -1s. We're going to get rid of the -2s. We're going to get rid of more -1s. And then we can start replacing 0s with +2s. And we can add rolling +1s and all the rollers here. I always add the rollers last because rollers can roll you into bad things. So if you don't have advantage on an attack and you hit rollers, you can hit a roller and another roller and then pull your miss card. And then all of it's just thrown away. So rollers are kind of a two-edged sword. Sometimes they're really good and you can do a crap ton of damage with them. And other times they'll roll you into that miss card. So I don't usually take these early on. I wait to build up my deck and make my deck more powerful first before I add this in. Because it gives me less of a chance of pulling these negative cards once I, of course, take them all out. Because I can take 2 of them out right here. And then I can get rid of my -2. And right there, that's 3 perks, and we're already to only having a -1 modifier. And we can get rid of that one right here. And there we go. No negative modifiers. Scoundrel's doing a crap ton more damage now than she was before. And then you can start upgrading modifiers like your zeros into +2s. You can remove all your 0 cards almost if you want. And now we're talking, now we're down to the rollers. So before we get into the rollers, every attack is doing basically more than base damage, except for 1, and then you're going to have that 1 miss in there somewhere. So again, this is why it's good to make sure you have a way to give advantage. So another head item I didn't mention earlier with the items, if we go back there real quick, you do have this from the very beginning, is the Eagle Eye Goggles. If another character doesn't need these, like I usually want to put these on a character who has a really, like a big multi-attack or something, but with the Scoundrel having like those big boss killing moves where you use a lot of burn cards, it might be a good idea to give her the Eagle Eye Goggles, because then you can guarantee you're not going to miss. And if you've upgraded your perks and you're at this point, then you're always going to get something really good out of you. Use the Eagle Eye Goggles so that this won't matter, because if it comes up, it's not going to get used. The better card will, and you can do a ton of damage with it. So that covers the Scoundrel in detail, from all the cards, suggested items, and the perks. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm going to continue this series with another one of the starting characters very soon. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and keep on gaming.